is The Dan Mason Show on News Talk 780 KOH and KKOH.com.
We're on the 8th floor rooftop terrace of the building where Fox News broadcasts, with a gorgeous view of the Capitol to our right, and it's a fantastic view of the whole city. Glad to be here from our nation's capital. Hello, it's Dan Mason, just past 4 o'clock. Our event is sponsored by the Federation for American Immigration Reform, and our first guest in this hour, Dale Wilcox, is here. He is the executive director and the general counsel for what is known as the Immigration Reform Law Institute, which is the legal arm of FAIR.
That's right.
Dale, great to see you.
Glad to be here.
So let's talk a little bit of the legality. I guess the simple question is the easiest way to start. You know, is Biden doing anything that's actually legal here?
The answer would be
just wondering.
Hardly. And that's where we come in. We've been suing him, and thank God for Texas. God bless Texas. Texas has been bringing lawsuits, and we actually are outside counsel for the state of Texas and have sued the Biden administration for, not testing people for COVID and releasing them into the country. We had a success here recently. The Biden administration ended the Wait in Mexico policy that the Trump administration had that essentially ended catch and release. And Texas sued on that also, and thankfully we've gotten that enjoined in the courts. So we're having to go to the courts.
Well, the courts were the scene of an awful lot of, let's just say what it was, anti-Trump stuff. There was an awful lot. The entire 4 years of the administration, pretty much everything he did, especially relating to this, right, was challenged in court.
It was, and we filed during the Trump years, the 4 years, we filed more than 180 court briefs all throughout the country defending the president's policies.
And what was the result of most of those?
We actually won most of the cases, and it took going to the Supreme Court in a lot of instances, like the Wait in Mexico policy was challenged. It had to go all the way to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court upheld it. The funding for the wall, that they were trying to slow that down, and in many different venues. We had cases all over the country trying to stop the wall, and we won on that. So we just had to, the ACLU said after Trump won the election before the inauguration, their game plan was to gum up and slow down Trump in the courts.
Yeah.
And that's what they did for 4 years.
Nonstop.
Yeah.
And you mentioned the, keep them in Mexico policy.
Yes.
Probably one of the most effective things that he did.
Oh, absolutely. Because if people don't understand how this works, illegal aliens come across the border, and what they'll do is they're coached, sadly, by these not-for-profit open border groups to say, I fear persecution in my country. No, they're coming here because they're economic migrants.
Yeah.
They want a better job. So they say, I fear persecution. And what happens is DHS will give them a notice to appear for immigration court. And right now we're so backlogged. I believe the last time I looked at the stats, you're 800 days out before you get a hearing. So what they do is release them into the country and say, come back to your court hearing. Yeah. 9 in 10 don't show up for their court hearing.
9 in 10?
9 in 10.
We hear lots of reports about those numbers, and sometimes they're all over the map. That's probably the biggest one I've heard.
Yeah. 9 in 10. 2019, that was released, that 9 in 10 don't show up. So essentially, it was catch and release. We never hear from these people again. They just assimilate into the country, and, there are real harms here. They're taking American jobs, obviously. The Biden administration is releasing people into the country without COVID testing. And, they're mandating the vaccines for federal employees, for companies that have employees of 100 or more.
Yeah.
They are not mandating vaccination for people coming into the country illegally, and they're releasing them into our communities.
That's about as plain as it gets, and it's amazing that argument hasn't gotten more traction than it has, which tells you how hard they're fighting it.
Yeah. And the administration, when asked about this at a press conference here recently, their press secretary said, well, they're not. These people aren't intending to stay very long.
I heard that.
Are you kidding me?
Well, where are they gonna go?
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Maybe they're just heading north to Canada.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
Dale Wilcox is the executive director of the Immigration Reform Law Institute. Now speaking, we're speaking of the law. Ignoring it doesn't seem to be new. We're doing it on so many levels here in Washington, not just immigration, but that's the one that you focus on the most. We got sanctuary policies. We have no border security, as everybody knows. People are encouraged not to cooperate with our federal agencies like ICE. How the heck do you navigate this mess and hold their feet to the fire, as we say?
Well, it's interesting. If you poll legal immigrants,
yes.
they say they want the law enforced. They have come from countries many times where corruption reigns, there is no rule of law, no integrity, corrupt politicians, and they want the law enforced here. They don't want this country to become where they left. And sadly, the current administration quite frankly, don't care about the American people. What they care about, and their end game is potential future voters. That's what this is about. And then there are some in that contingent who, quite frankly, hate America, hate everything we stand for, hate the flag, hate patriotism, and they want to collapse the system, overwhelm the system so that they can reset it.
They want to bring more people here that want to change our country.
Exactly. And our job is to go into the courts, and where the law is clear, like when an illegal alien comes across the border, the law says you are to present them with a notice to appear, an official immigration document. You put them in the system, notice to appear for immigration court at a later date, at minimum. They're not even doing that now.
No.
They're releasing them with a document that says, we'd like you. This is not, it actually says on the document, this is not immigration proceedings. We'd like you to show up at an immigration office eventually. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, please come back now that you violated the law.
Yes. So this is where we're at. But, our job is to, at the Institute, is to sue them and make them follow the law. So we have several cases going on right now. And like I said, Paxton's been great in Texas, and several other state attorneys general have stepped up. Florida, Arizona,
Florida,
Missouri. Louisiana. I encourage people, call your AGs, put pressure on them, get them to get involved in these lawsuits.
What about at the state and local level? Like our listeners in Reno, Nevada are listening right now. We've got a Democrat governor. We've got a Democrat legislature. Our hands are kind of tied to a large degree. But across the country, what can state legislators do if they want to try and fight this?
Well, look, Indiana. Let's take Indiana, for instance. State legislators. Indiana passed a great statewide anti-sanctuary law. Statewide. Okay. And after Trump won in 2016, the city of Gary, Indiana, and East Chicago, Indiana, immediately passed what they called a welcoming ordinance. So it said, cops can't cooperate with federal immigration authorities, on and on and on. It was a sanctuary law. We brought suit under Indiana state law, and thankfully the state of Indiana actually joined our lawsuit, so they intervened on our lawsuit, and we won. We beat them. We got Gary and East Chicago's sanctuary ordinances struck down. So
now, that's interesting, because I always go back to what happened in Arizona several years ago, right, when they were, hey, we're going to ask you for your papers and we pull you over.
Yeah.
And the ruling was, it's immigration, whatever the feds say, go.
Yeah.
So how did you win in Indiana?
Well, state and locals are allowed to do some things, and that's one thing they can do. Okay, they can. What happened there in this? Well, the Supreme Court was made up of different members at that time.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
So Kennedy wrote the opinion in that case. So if that case went before the court today, I don't know if you would get the same outcome. But there are things state and local jurisdictions can do. They can go so far. And the Supreme Court has, in these cases, formed the outer boundary of how far they can go. And states can say, you must cooperate. Well, look at it like this. Those cases were decided on preemption. Look, the federal government has decided this is how they want to handle enforcement. You can't go beyond that. Well, all the, Indiana's law, for instance, what it says is you must cooperate with the feds, what they want to do. So it's not going beyond what the federal government is doing. It's actually saying cooperate with what they're doing. So, courts have said that's okay.
All right. Texas is a great example of, I think, how to fight back and hopefully how to fight back effectively. Governor Abbott says, hey, if you're not going to secure the border, I'm going to.
Yeah.
Is he going to get away with that, legally speaking?
I think so. I think there is Supreme Court precedent that states says states have an interest to protect when it comes to illegal immigration. It costs them millions of dollars.
Yeah.
And that's how Texas, frankly, has gotten standing to sue in these cases. They have proven we're injured. We're having to pay boatloads of money to take care of these people. Crime has skyrocketed. So, our law enforcement agencies are overworked and taxed, and, just their resources are being depleted. So, and the courts have said, yes, you are harmed, you have standing. And then thankfully, we've actually gotten to the merits of the cases, and they've ruled in our favor when they do.
I've spoken about this many times on the show because you hear things rejected in the courts a lot of times. Goes, so-and-so doesn't have standing.
Yes.
Sometimes I shake my head because it doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah.
How do you deal with that?
Well, it's amazing that when Trump was president, everybody had standing. Anybody had standing to challenge, building the wall. Like environmental groups were bringing lawsuits to challenge his designation of funds from DOD to build the wall. What standing did they have to do that? They had absolutely no standing under the DOD statute where he moved the money.
Logical.
And thankfully the courts saw that, not the lower courts. Now the lower courts were like, because they cherry-pick judges in courtrooms, and the lower courts were like, oh, yeah, they have standing because of X, and we're just like, are you kidding? We've been fighting for years to get into court, and we get bounced on standing constantly because, folks, I hate to say it, the American taxpayer does not, there's no such thing as general taxpayer standing per se. You can't go into court and say, hey, I'm having to pay more in local taxes to support these schools that are overcrowded now. I'm having to pay, more for crime prevention and law enforcement and whatnot. They bounce you out of court. They say, I'm sorry, that everybody has that complaint. Anybody could bring that lawsuit. So
seems like it ought to be more valid then.
Yeah, right. Well, it didn't work, and then thankfully we've gotten around that with Texas and the Fifth Circuit, which is wonderful, and then the Supreme Court has been great on this issue too.
Wow, great information. Dale Wilcox, Executive Director of the Immigration Reform Law Institute, with some of the legal stuff that's going on. Thanks for the time, Dale. Good to see you.
My pleasure. Thank you.